The other classification of matter according to its composition is called your mixture. Mixtures are a combination of two or more substances in which the substances retain their identity. So that means the components or the substances being mixed do not undergo a chemical reaction. Also, in mixtures, there is no chemical bond formed when two or more substances are combined. That is as opposed to your compounds. In compounds, two or more atoms chemically combine, therefore there is a chemical reaction to form a new substance with different chemical properties. Whereas in mixtures, the components will retain their own identity. There will be no chemical reactions. Since there will be no chemical reaction, they will retain their own identity. Mixtures can be classified into two. It could either be homogeneous or heterogeneous. There will be instances wherein they will be spelled as Neous, so they will be read as homogeneous or heterogeneous. They are one and the same. Now, homogeneous or homogeneous has the prefix homo, meaning the same. An example of this is a solution. Now, in homogeneous mixtures, the components cannot be distinguished from each other, and they appear as one substance only. That is because the particles of the substances are evenly distributed all throughout. Few examples of these are air, that is because you cannot distinguish the particles present in the air. Air is composed of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% others. Despite it being composed of many types of elements, you cannot distinguish each component. Next is salt water and 10-karat gold. Solutions are homogeneous mixtures. They have very small particles. They do not exhibit Tyndall effect or they do not scatter light when light is flashed through them, and the particles do not settle. That is because the particles in a solution are small enough to remain suspended. Another example is your rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol has its composition printed on the label, whether it be 70% alcohol or 50% alcohol. If 100 ml of alcohol has a label that says 70% alcohol, then that means 70 milliliters of it is alcohol. The remaining 30% or the 30 ml is water. Despite it being composed of two different substances, you cannot identify which one is the alcohol and which one is the water. The other one is heterogeneous mixture or heterogeneous. There are two classifications. One is your suspension or sometimes referred to as coarse mixture if it is a solid, and then we have your colloid. Now, in heterogeneous, hetero meaning different, the components of the mixture are visible. That is because they do not mix together and that the particles are not evenly distributed. Examples of these are sand on water, vegetable soup, oil and water. Another is your typical halo-halo. These two pictures give out the differences between heterogeneous and homogeneous mixtures. In heterogeneous, hetero meaning different, you can see the different parts. In homogeneous, homo meaning the same, the parts are evenly mixed, or you can only see one face. Also in heterogeneous mixtures, the individual components of a mixture remain physically separated and they can be seen as separate components. That means you can identify the different components of the mixture. Whereas for homogeneous or homogeneous, the composition of the mixture after some stirring or after some shaking is the same throughout the solution. Let's go to the classification of heterogeneous mixtures. First one is called your suspension. Under suspension, it is a classification of heterogeneous mixtures in which the large particles are relatively scattered through solid, liquid, gas, and it is bigger than solution and colloid. Now, since a particle of the suspension is bigger, then that means gravity could have an effect on it. Once gravity takes over, the particles that are suspended in a suspension will settle at the bottom of the container. Some of the examples of this are fresh squeezed lemonade, that is because the pulps are big, so that means gravity will take effect on them and that the pulps will settle at the bottom of the container. So will the sand in water. Since the particles of the sand are large, then that means the sand particles will settle at the bottom. The other classification of your heterogeneous mixture is called colloid. In colloid, the particles of one substance is dispersed or is floating around throughout a dispersing medium made of another substance. An example of this is milk. Milk is composed of many types of substances, most of them being the milk itself and the fat globules or the fat particles. Since you can easily identify the fat particles and that these particles remain suspended on the medium or the dispersing medium, which is the milk, it is classified under your colloids. Other examples are clouds, smoke, and mayo. Clouds being water droplets being suspended in air, smoke being solid particles suspended in air, mayo with the egg being suspended in oil. So those are your different classifications of matter. Now matter can be classified into two. It could either be pure substances or substances wherein the chemical properties are the same all throughout, and that the components could either be number one, separated through chemical means, or they could not be separated at all, such is the case with your elements. That is because elements are already in their basic form. Under elements, we have your metals, nonmetals, metalloids, and noble gases. If the components of the pure substances can be separated through chemical means or through a chemical reaction, then it is classified under your compounds. Now, compounds could either be composed of only one element with two or more of its atoms chemically combined, or two or more different elements chemically combined. They could either be acids, base, salts, or oxides. The other classification of matter, if their components can be easily separated through physical means or mechanical means, or if the chemical properties of the components remain the same, then they fall under your mixtures. Mixtures can be classified into two. It is either a homogeneous mixture, homo meaning the same, so it is a type of a mixture wherein you cannot see the different components. And then we also have your heterogeneous, hetero meaning different, so that means you can see or you can easily identify the components of the substances. Suspensions are typically used if it involves higher amount of liquids. Coarse mixture is used if the particles are solid, such as pizzas. The other one being colloid. Let us have the following examples. Number one, mayonnaise, with the egg being suspended in oil, so it is a colloid. Muddy water, wherein the mud will eventually settle at the bottom, it is a suspension. Fog, wherein the water is dispersed in air, it is a colloid. Salt water, wherein the salt particles are dissolved in the water, that is a solution. And then Italian salad dressing, wherein you can actually spot the different condiments floating around. It is a suspension.